She's like, I'm gonna kill you. And I'm like, well, that's an awfully mean thing to say.
Matt Brown was once known to millions of Americans as the eldest son of the Brown family in Alaskan Bush People. On screen, he was the wild, tough, familiar face of a family living off the grid. But behind that image was a very different man. Matt was gifted, sensitive, and deeply wounded. He taught himself ancient languages, studied Egyptian hieroglyphs and Sanskrit, but remained trapped in a life he never truly chose. Fame did not save Matt. It exposed him. Behind the cameras, Matt struggled with addiction, family distance, public judgment, and secrets he said he could no longer keep buried. When he began speaking out, the price was heavy. In May 2026, Matt's life came to a tragic end in the Okanogan River. But the question is not only how he died. The bigger question is what pushed him to that point, and why a man who kept trying to be heard ended up leaving this world alone. Today, we look back at the painful life of Matt Brown to search for the answer. A family like no other. Matthew Jeremiah Brown was born on September 7, 1982, in Fort Worth, Texas. When he was still a toddler, his father, Billy Brown, pulled the family out of city life and moved them deep into the Alaskan wilderness. Their new home had no road access. To reach the nearest town, they had to travel by boat. Billy and Ami Brown raised 7 children there. No regular school, no neighbors, no friends their own age. The children were homeschooled, worked side by side, and called themselves a wolfpack. To the outside world, it sounded wild and romantic. But for a child growing up inside it, that world could also feel very small. As the eldest son, Matt's role had been decided long before television cameras arrived. He was expected to be the survival expert, the talker, and the emotional anchor of the family. But behind that image was a side of Matt viewers rarely saw. He taught himself ancient languages, studied Egyptian hieroglyphs, Sanskrit, petroglyphs, and sign language, and found beauty in places others ignored. He also painted. That was Matt Brown behind closed doors. Then television arrived, and America was introduced to a much simpler version of him. The eldest son, born to perform. On May 6, 2014, Alaskan Bush People premiered on the Discovery Channel. Matt Brown was 31 years old. Almost immediately, he became the show's breakout star. His warmth, his wilderness stories, and his rough but likable charm gave millions of viewers a reason to come back every Friday night. By 2015, the show was drawing nearly 5 million viewers per episode. But behind the image of a family born wild and untouched by modern life, the truth was far more complicated. Before the cameras framed their return to Alaska, the Browns had spent years living in Colorado. During breaks in filming, they were not always staying in the remote homestead the show presented as their real home. They often stayed in nearby lodges with electricity, hot water, and internet. Then came the legal trouble. In 2014, an Alaska grand jury indicted Billy Brown and his son Joshua, known as Bam Bam, over state permanent fund dividend applications. By 2016, both had pleaded guilty and faced fines and probation. The family's off-grid image had begun to crack in a very public way. Discovery also described the show as a docudrama, meaning it could mix real moments with staged scenes. For many viewers, that detail passed unnoticed. But Matt understood what it meant. He knew where the real life ended and where the performance began. He knew the lodges, the homestead, and the distance between the story America watched and the life his family actually lived. Still, season after season, he kept playing his role. That is what makes Matt's story so painful. On screen, he was sold as a symbol of wild freedom. Off-screen, he was carrying the weight of a life shaped by cameras, expectations, and secrets he could not easily escape. By the time viewers began to question the show, Matt had already been living inside that contradiction for years. But the first visible crack had appeared even before America knew his name. The unfilmed battle. On August 30th, 2013, just months before Alaskan Bush People premiered, Matt borrowed a woman's car after a night out at a bar in Juneau. He crashed into a parked motorcycle and left without reporting it. When police found him, his blood alcohol level was nearly twice Alaska's legal limit. In February 2014, he was sentenced to 3 days in jail and 18 months of probation. Most fans, still waiting for the show to air, knew nothing about it. By 2016, Matt's drinking had become impossible to ignore. He entered inpatient rehab for 35 days. Afterward, he told people that he had been spiraling for a long time. The things that once excited him no longer meant anything. He traced the problem back to his time in Juneau, where drinking slowly became part of his life, until he realized how far he had fallen. When Matt left rehab, he tried to frame it as a turning point. He said people lose their way sometimes, and those 35 days had helped him understand himself and turn weakness into strength. But that hope did not last. In 2018, Matt relapsed and entered the Betty Ford Center in California. That year, Billy told the press that the family would rather lose Matt to rehab for a while than lose him forever. Years later, those words would feel painfully haunting. After his second rehab stay, Matt never returned to the show. That same year, the family moved from Alaska to Washington State. They left without him. Around that time, 2 women in California accused Matt of sexual assault in separate incidents. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office reviewed the cases, but found insufficient evidence to prosecute. No charges were filed. Still, the allegations remained part of his public story, unproven in court, but impossible to ignore. The relapses, his exit from the show, and the allegations pushed Matt further from his family. His life had entered a place with no clear way back. But the public scandals were only the visible wounds. The deeper question was what Matt believed he knew, and why saying it would cost him almost everything. The Patriarch, the Silence, and the Campfire Confession. On February 7, 2021, Billy Brown died at 68 after suffering a seizure. His son Bear announced the news on Instagram and described him as a beloved father and rare family patriarch. Bear had recently welcomed his own son, River, and Billy had been able to meet his grandson before he passed. In his tribute, Bear also reminded people to hold their loved ones close, because no one knows which moment will be the last. Matt had reportedly reconciled with Billy before his death and returned in time to say goodbye. But when Season 13 aired its memorial episode for Billy, Matt was missing from the footage. The rest of the family appeared on screen. Matt did not. No public explanation was ever given. 2 months later, on April 11, 2021, Matt sat alone outside and turned on his camera. That video became one of the most painful and divisive moments in the show's history. He admitted he should not be exposing family secrets, but said keeping them inside was destroying him. He appeared cold, hungry, and emotionally exhausted. Then he began tearing apart the image his family and the show had built for years. To be clear, these were Matt's own claims, and they have never been independently verified. According to Matt, the show had misrepresented how the family really lived. He accused producers of supplying his parents with drugs, including cocaine, and said that toxic environment helped fuel his later addiction. He also claimed Billy controlled the show's money, and that records handled by his mother after Billy's death showed he had been denied access to about $360,000. The most painful claim was smaller, but more personal. Matt said he had asked his mother for $100 for food, and she refused. Bear quickly rejected the allegations. He said Matt was spreading terrible lies about their father soon after his death, and suggested his brother needed mental health treatment. Discovery never publicly responded. From the outside, viewers had no way to know the full truth. It was one family member's word against another's. But one thing was hard to ignore: a man sitting alone in the cold, saying he was hungry, and choosing to stop pretending. After that video, Matt seemed to become even more isolated from his family. In family psychology, there is a concept often described as the person who tells the truth in a broken system. That person speaks what others avoid, and often loses their place in the group because of it. Matt appeared to step into that role. The cost was brutal. By 2022, Alaskan Bush People had stopped airing new episodes. The world that had shaped Matt's public identity since he was 31 was gone. For him, it was not only the end of a show, it was the loss of the only structure that had kept him visible to the public. The price of reality TV fame. But by then, Matt's story had become part of something much larger, the darker side of reality television. Since the mid-2000s, at least 28 former reality TV stars around the world have reportedly died by suicide, based on publicly documented cases. In the UK, the deaths of Love Island alumni Mike Thalassides and Sophie Gradden are often cited as painful examples. Both were gone before the age of 30. Reality TV sells itself as entertainment, but it often builds that entertainment from real people's pain. The drama is not written for actors. It is pulled from actual families, actual wounds, and actual instability. Cast members may be paid per episode, but when the show ends, there is often no lasting safety net, no long-term health support, and no easy return to normal life. The audience may disappear from television, but it does not disappear from the internet. Matt was caught in the middle of all of it. He was already battling addiction. His family life was already complicated. Then fame placed him in front of millions of viewers he was never truly prepared to face. After 2022, Matt tried to rebuild through his own YouTube channel and Instagram. His online bio described a quieter life focused on recovery, personal growth, and positive entertainment. His audience was smaller than Discovery's, but the bond felt more personal. People connected with him because he no longer seemed to be performing. He spoke about failure, recovery, losing his way, and trying to begin again. That was the painful paradox of Matt's final years. The honesty that pushed him further from his family was the same honesty that made strangers feel close to him. But behind those updates was a harder truth. Matt was no longer the star of a hit show. He was no longer playing a character in someone else's story. He was a wounded man trying to hold together the broken pieces of his life, while the warning signs appeared in public, one by one. The tragedy is that people saw them. They just did not know how to read them in time. And as Matt's own life grew more unstable, the Brown family was facing another crisis at the same time. What he said before he left. As the image of reality TV fame faded, real life hit the Brown family hard in early 2026. Matt's mother, Amy, now 61, had survived late-stage lung cancer after being given only a 3% chance back in 2017. She had already lost her husband, Billy, in 2021. Then, on April 11, 2026, she was hospitalized with both COVID-19 and pneumonia. 6 weeks later, she would lose her eldest son. While Amy was fighting another health crisis, Matt continued posting videos online. By mid-May, he hosted a live stream from a public park in Washington. Viewers said he appeared disoriented, and some feared he might have been under the influence. It did not feel like a recovery update or an adventure video. It looked like a man in crisis, broadcasting to strangers who had no real way to reach him. On May 10, 2026, about 3 weeks before his death, Matt said he had spent the night sleeping in a cemetery. He explained that years earlier, his father had told him cemeteries could be safe places to rest while traveling, because people usually leave you alone there. 5 years after Billy's death, Matt followed that advice because he had nowhere else to go. He slept between 2 graves. The next morning, Matt appeared on camera again. He pointed to his head and then to his heart, trying to reassure viewers that he was okay. He thanked them for their support. Most people believed him and moved on. But the image was heartbreaking. This was the same man who had once taught himself Sanskrit and Egyptian hieroglyphs out of a deep hunger to understand the world. Now he was sleeping between graves, telling strangers through a screen that he was still holding on. 17 days later, the river became the final chapter of his story. 5 days on the river. On Wednesday, May 27, 2026, a 911 call came in from the Okanogan River near Oroville, Washington. The caller reported seeing a man sitting in the shallow water. They had spoken to him briefly. Then they looked away for only a few seconds. When they turned back, the man was face down in the river, being carried away by the current. A Brown family member later said Matt had been seen that same morning near the Driscoll Island Wildlife Area, about a mile from where the call was made. Along the riverbank, authorities found a backpack. Inside it was an empty holster. The Okanogan County Sheriff's Office launched a major search. Divers, K-9 units, sonar equipment, and a Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife boat crew were brought in. Matt's younger brother Gabe was there too, helping alongside law enforcement. For 2 painful days they searched the river. Then a severe storm hit. The water rose. The current grew stronger. Conditions became too dangerous, and the official search had to stop. That was when local volunteers stepped in. Ordinary people took over the search because they did not want the Brown family left waiting with no answers. On Friday, May 29th, Bear posted his first public video. He said he had been told Matt had likely taken his own life near the river, though he was still hoping the information was wrong. He also admitted that he had always feared addiction might take Matt through an overdose, but he had never imagined this. 2 days later, a private search team found Matt's body. His younger brother Noah was part of that team. Noah helped pull him from the water and confirmed it was Matt. That night, Noah asked people to pray and to tell their loved ones they loved them while they still had the chance. By the next morning, the family's private grief had to become public, and one detail in Bear's message changed the way this whole tragedy felt. The morning Bear turned on the camera. On May 31st, Bear Brown confirmed what the family had feared for days. The body recovered from the Okanogan River was Matt. The eldest son of the old Brown family wolfpack was gone at 43. The pain was even heavier because Noah, Matt's younger brother, had been part of the private search team. He had helped pull Matt from the water and had to face the truth there on the riverbank. For the Brown family, the grief was not one single blow. It came in waves. Bear pushed back against rumors that the family had simply abandoned Matt. He said the situation was far more complicated than any headline could explain. But the most painful part of his message was not his defense of the family. It was what he said about Matt's final days. According to Bear, Matt had been deeply hurt by cruel comments from online trolls. Bear reminded viewers that the person behind a screen is still a real human being, and that careless words can leave wounds people never see. This was not just a grieving brother making a general statement. It was Bear trying to name one of the pressures Matt had carried near the end. That made his old words feel even more painful. 5 years earlier, after Billy's death, Bear had urged people to hold their loved ones close, because no one knows which moment will be the last. Back then, he could not have known he would one day face that same heartbreak with his own brother. And Billy's words from 2018 felt just as haunting. He had once said the family would rather lose Matt to rehab for a while than lose him forever. Years later, that hope had turned into something unbearably final. But Matt's story did not end at the river. It left behind a harder question, one that no headline, no episode, and no family statement could fully answer. The man who could read Sanskrit but couldn't read the comments. So, who was Matt Brown, really? Not the character on Alaskan Bush People, not the tabloid headline, not the legal record, not the man people judged through a screen. He was someone far more complicated. Matt taught himself Egyptian hieroglyphs from scattered books in the Alaskan bush. He studied Sanskrit because he was curious about the ancient world. He learned sign language even when there was no one around to answer him. He studied petroglyphs left behind by people who had been gone for thousands of years. He could read traces of the distant past, but in the end, he could not survive the cruelty of the present. That is the painful contradiction at the center of his story. The honesty that pushed Matt away from his family was the same honesty that made strangers feel close to him. He built a small community by being open about failure, addiction, recovery, and pain. Then some people used that same vulnerability against him. From the outside, people want a simple answer. They want to know who was right and who was wrong. But family pain is rarely that clean. Maybe Matt was right about some things and wrong about others. Maybe his family had reasons outsiders will never fully understand. Maybe online cruelty was not the only reason his life ended, but it was not harmless either. No one in this story fits perfectly into the role of hero or villain. When Matt died, his mother was still recovering from COVID and pneumonia. The family millions once watched building fires and catching fish is now carrying a loss no camera can make sense of. Matt Brown was 43 years old. He was the eldest of 7 siblings. He was the one who dared to speak out, whether everything he said was fully accurate or not, and he paid a terrible price for that honesty. The people who loved him and the strangers who thought they knew him are now left with a painful possibility. Maybe they never really knew Matt at all. And maybe, for much of his short life, Matt was never truly allowed to know himself either. If this story moved you, share your thoughts with care. Leave the kind of comment Matt would have needed to read, not the kind that helped break him. As Bear reminded people after his brother's death, there is a real human being on the other side of the screen. And if you or someone you love is in crisis, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the United States is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You do not have to face it alone.